Good morning and welcome to the Bidders Conference for the Title II and Tribal Youth um, RFPs. Today is June 27th, 2019. This is a public meeting. We do have members in, or we have some folks here in the audience, as well as the meeting is also being live streamed. So I'll give some information to both of you. For the folks that are here in the audience, a little housekeeping real quick. There are actually restrooms here if you do need to step out. They are coded on the back wall in the corner on your exit as you leave the room. The code is 3091 pound. So if you have to use the restroom, just feel free, come back and forth. We'll probably leave the door open so you're able to just come and go as you need to. Need to take a phone call, I ask that you please mute your phones in the room. And then if you need to take a call, just step out. Hopefully this won't be all day, but I will do my best to answer as many questions as I can in this process. So the folks that are live streaming today, you don't have the benefit of the printed materials that the folks have here. But if you don't have it, please, we're going to be referencing back and forth to the RFPs themselves on the bscc.ca.gov webpage. The main page, there's a link that will take you to the RFP location. If you want to follow along with, I'm going to reference pages of the RFP if you want to just take notes, or if you want to follow along with the RFP, either way would be absolutely fine. So folks that are in the room here, there is actually printed copies on the table. So for today, I am actually going to, since they tie together and they're part of the same program, I'm going to tie in this presentation, the Title II RFP with the tribal youth. There's a number of items that cross over because they both come from the same federal funding. So what we will do is we will go through the Title II RFP, and then we'll take a small pause after questions and answers are done with the Title II, and then we will go into the Tribal Youth Grant RFP and discuss some significant differences. I'll just point out some differences because much of the information, as you see, is going to be the same conditions that are passed down from the federal government to us that would be passed down to the recipient of these funds. Much of it is the same on both RFPs, so we won't have to double up unless there's questions on it and we need to. So we'll see how this goes. So the purpose of this conference, or this bidders conference, is really to provide some technical assistance and answer some technical questions to the best of my abilities. And again, I may not be able to answer all the questions today, so we're going to take them in. And for those of you who are live streaming, there is a way for you to ask questions through the dialog box. I'm looking at my IT support over here, Catherine. They can actually, there's a way that they can ask the questions through live stream. So please use that resource. I will pause throughout this presentation so you don't have to hold questions to the end. I will make breaks along the way. And if I get too far along, please chime in and say, stop. I will stop. This conference is for you. This is for you. I want to help you guys the best I can to put your best foot forward on developing your proposals. So again, the information I'm going to provide is really going to be pretty basic. It's a larger overview. We can get into some specific questions if you have them, but as I go through this presentation, I'm not going to get into an incredible amount of detail. I'm going to just guide you to the locations of where to find some things and give you some broad overview of some specific topics that will be important to you as you develop your proposals. So participation, if you need me to stop, I will. If you need to have questions, we'll head down that path. So introductions, I'm Timothy Polasic. I'm a field representative here at the Board of State and Community Corrections. My position is assigned to the administrative side of managing the grant program for Title II. And we'll get into a little bit of what that means as we progress through these slides. So to start this off, are we good to go? The audience here is shaking their heads, so I assume that people are shaking their computers or whatever they may be doing with you, Catherine. So we will go ahead and get moving. So today's agenda, I just went through the introductions of who I am. I don't have anybody else up here with me today, but we do have additional support. We have some analyst staff that support and will be supporting the rating and review or the technical assistance portion. They also will be providing some support contact for you. We have the JJ / grants website. It will go to me and a couple other staff, so we'll make sure we can answer promptly if one of us is not available immediately. And then we also have a research staff as we get into the rating process itself. Our research staff, with all of their knowledge on mathematical variances and whatever else is involved in the rating process, they're the experts and they provide assistance on that front. We have some executive staff that will be the approvers of this. We also have a state advisory group, and we'll get into that a little bit. So we'll discuss grant summary. We'll talk about the program a little bit, as I mentioned. We'll talk about the executive steering committee, what that means to you a little bit. It does play in as you write your proposals. We'll talk about the overview of the RFP itself. We'll cover some specific components within it. We'll talk about the rating process. We'll talk about proposal instructions and then some key dates. I have questions listed at the end, but I'm going to take pauses all the way through, so we'll be able to ask questions all the way along. So assuming we're ready to go, let's get into this. So for a broad overview, the Title II program is a federal grant program. With that, it is actually established through federal legislation, and it's the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, the JJDPA. And for those who are watching my PowerPoint, I forgot the delinquency part of it, but we'll continue on. So it's the JJDPA. And the administrator at the federal level is the U.S. Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, which is under a myriad of acronyms, but they reside within the U.S. Department of Justice. So there's two functions that are mandated within the JJDPA. One of them is for a state administrating agency. That would be the nuts and bolts on how to actually run grants, how to actually provide technical assistance to subrecipients, how to properly ensure that the funding is being spent correctly, et cetera. And the Board of State and Community Corrections is that agency as the state administrating agency. So it's grant agreements will be between the Board of State and Community Corrections and the subrecipients that are awarded funds. There is another entity involved in this as mandated by the JJDPA, and that's, they call it a state advisory group. The name for the state of California is the State Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, actually known as SACJAB. This is government, we love our acronyms. So they are by mandate a mix of nonprofit, a mix of government individuals. We have former judges, we have district attorneys, we have individuals who, and then there's a mandated a portion of youth that have to be on this in a ratio with youth to adult. Then the youth have to have been involved in the juvenile justice system. So this group gives a um, well-rounded expertise, so to speak, subject matter experts that would assist in determining, the program purpose areas, what, certain direction, et cetera. So the way this process works then in California is we have this committee, the SACJAB, and they will convene what's called an executive steering committee, which is another committee that develops the RFP, and there will be a number of members. We'll talk about that in a second. A couple of members that will actually be on that as well. They will actually develop the RFP. It'll go to the SACJAB. They'll look at it, make any adjustments possibly, or approve it as designed. And then it will then go to the Board of State and Community Corrections, who's the receiver of the funds. They do the final approval. So we just went through that process. This grant was worked its way up through and was approved by, or this RFPs were approved by the Board of State and Community Corrections on the 12th of June. So that was the release. So for this program, federally funding. So the federal government passes funding on to us as a state of California, and it's formula based. So it's a matter of population of those between the ages of 15 and 18 is a factor, as well as detentions, et cetera. There's a number of factors within the JJDPA that determine the percentage, and then it's Congress that determines the amount for the total amount available to all the states, and then based off of your percentage of the formula is how much you receive. So for this grant, the dollars here aren't necessarily reflective of the dollars that are given to us through the feds. They're reflective of the amount available each year because we're actually crossing over a few years of funding to come up with this amount. So um, doesn't directly tie, but it's pretty darn close. So, and out of the money from the feds, there's an administration portion that covers staff. There's also a portion that covers the expenses of our advisory group, et cetera. So a little bit more to the budget than just this amount, but there's a mandated percentage that has to pass through to subrecipients, and the amount that we're utilizing to fund this program for this RFP. The total amount available annually is just under $4 million. That's um, so. So as we go through this, you could probably do the math and calculate exactly what total amount of grants that might be awarded here. So just under $4 million. The awards this year will be 3-year awards, and there'll be 3 12-month periods. We're not going by a calendar year. We're not going by a fiscal year. They will actually be from based off of the calendar date or the date of when the award is received. 3 years from that will be the completion of the program. So the maximum amount award for this RFP on the Title II program is $350,000 annually. You can develop your proposals up to that amount, or just ask for what you need, whatever works best for however you're building your program. And then the anticipated period of the program, and I say anticipated because once we go through the process of receiving the proposals are then going to be rated, and then it'll go back through our committees, our SACJAB, and then to the BSCC to approve them. So if there's some kind of hiccup in the way where they say, no, take it back, do it again, I doubt that will happen, but that's why we'd say, it's anticipated because, I don't expect any differences or changes, but should some conditions change from the federal government or something along those lines, um, just understand we're headed down this path for a December 1 start date. And then it'll be 3 years from that point in time. So we're looking at a November 30th, 2022 completion. So for this program also, the minimum pass through 70%. We'll get into that a little bit more because there are some conditions for this RFP. I'll just quickly state, and then we'll talk about it again, is that of that 70% pass through, it's the government entities that are required to have complete the pass through. A tribal government, if they are awarded and they provide these services as direct services contained within the tribe, they can be exempt from this amount. And also then NGOs, non-government organizations, are considered direct service providers, so they're not subject to the pass-through. So making sure we understand that part of it. And we'll cover that a little bit more in detail in a second here. So, and then also no match. We have no match required on this program. So within your RFP, we have page 3, it lists, and also on the cover, lists who's eligible. California counties are eligible. California cities are eligible. California school districts are eligible. Nonprofit, non-governmental organizations, and there's we'll talk about a location in our appendices that gives an explanation of that, and we'll get into that a little bit more detail. And then federally recognized Indian tribes. And there is some questions on this regarding the Indian tribe eligibility. It also includes law enforcement functions, but if they don't have law enforcement functions at the tribe itself, they can also, if they contract for those law enforcement functions, that's also acceptable. So I want to make sure that's okay. And then under school districts, I want to make sure it's also understood that based off of our California Code definition of school district, a county board of education is considered a school district. So they are the funding entity for the local school district. So if it's the county board of education that wants to apply and then work with multiple schools, et cetera, it's perfectly acceptable. The board of education is considered a school district. If you in our Q&A, Rob, if you take this note, in our Q&A, I'll actually reference the where we're getting that definition within California Code so that it's understood. So give me 1 second real quick. I'm going to take a look. So for the eligibility, we have included in Appendix A. Yeah, I got it. So under Appendix A, we have included the pertinent sections of the JJDPA under state plans that discuss eligibility. Recommend you read it. And then if you have any concerns or questions, please let us know. Um, Otherwise, this is who is eligible, and um, hopefully we get a good mix of applications and proposals. So within the application itself, on page 3, we talk about lead public agency. So just below the section on eligibility within the RFP on page 3, just want to make sure you understand what we mean by this. So you have the opportunity to present multiple proposals. Um, so with presenting multiple proposals, you have a lead agency, and my PowerPoint says lead public agency, but um, I'm going to change that here. Yeah, can't do it here. So basically what it is this. If you're a lead agency on a joint proposal, you can only be the lead agency on one joint proposal. Basically what we're trying to do is limit an agency or a county or any entity from presenting multiple proposals. Um, our expectation is that you work within your area, work within your jurisdiction, work within your community as you develop these partnerships to have one coalesced proposal coming forward within the group. So if you're going to do a joint proposal, you can be you can be only the lead agency on one, but however, you can be a partnering agency on multiple proposals. So if there's a number of entities that are applying, if you're a direct service provider, you want to be part of the group, and you get asked by a number of folks that are going forward as a lead agency, you can be a partnering agency on a number of proposals, but you can only be a lead on one. And we're trying to develop that coordination within the group, and then we're also, yeah, trying to have the groups work together to develop a single consolidated plan. Um, I hope that makes sense for you guys. So if you have any other questions, that please let me know. Um, so, all right. So on page, actually, I'm gonna we'll talk. Yeah, executive steering committee. So we do our best to develop these RFPs to limit the amount of potential conflicts of interest that may exist. So within our conflict of interest policies, if someone is actually on a policy making um, committee or board, and they were a part of the development of the request for proposals, that individual and the organization they're connected to would not be able to apply. So you can't have somebody who's developing the nuts and bolts of an RFP. You don't want the conflict would be they would have the potential to sway the RFP to benefit themselves. So that would be the rudimentary definition of a conflict of interest. So what we've provided, we have an executive steering committee that was a committee that was established by our state advisory group, the SACJAB, to develop the RFP solely out of your cohorts. We had a really good mix on our executive steering committee of folks that were nonprofit, folks that had backgrounds in LGBTQ services or LGBTQA plus, whether we had individuals that had Native American tribal experience, drug addiction services, diversion services. We had folks from the state Department of Education. It was a really good mix. So on Appendix G and H of the RFP includes the members of the SACJAB and the members that were on the executive steering committee. I want you to be aware of that because of the fact that if they were on that committee and your entity has some sort of a relationship with them, make sure you contact a person or contact us to ensure that that person did the proper recusals along the path so that your organization is not in a situation of having a conflict of interest. So for instance, we had two co-chairs, Rachel Rios and Michelle Scray Brown. Michelle Scray Brown is the Chief Probation Officer at San Bernardino County. So San Bernardino County Probation will not be applying. Our co-chair, Rachel Rios, she is the executive director of La Familia Family Services here in Sacramento. That agency will not be applying. So because they were a part of that development, their organizations will not be applying. So make sure you look at those lists to ensure that there is no issue. And really, I don't expect you to say, oh, they're on the list, there's an issue. What you want to do is if you see someone on the list, inquire. You can get a hold of us through our website, or not through our website, but through our email, jj_grants dot bscc.ca.gov. It's on the RFP, posted on our website as well. So if you have any questions regarding that, anybody you might see within that list that may create a potential conflict of interest, let's make sure that it's okay. All right. Ooh, skip a little too far. All right. Any questions on that so far? Any questions online so far? Are we doing good? Okay. So for our RFP, we'll start going through the RFP a little bit. So we have a couple key dates that I'll reference here. The first is letters of intent. Letters of intent are due back to us by July 12th, 2019. Basically, what this is something that tells us that you intend to apply. I mean, as it states. What it does for us is it's really non-binding. It's not something that if you put that in, we have to apply. It's for us. What that does is allows us to plan. If we know we have 50, 60, 70, or one of our recent grants, we had 180 proposals for one of our recent grants. If we know we're going to have that kind of volume, it helps us to plan the technical review process and the amount of staff resources that are going to be needed to complete that portion. We try to get the technical review process done in a couple of weeks um, for them then to be ready to move forward to the rating process. So within that, we need to know what is it going to take regarding staff? How many resources do we need? So it really just helps us. If you do not provide a letter of intent, you still can apply. It doesn't close you off. It just gives us a little bit of assistance. So I just ask you, if you're going to apply and you know it, please let us know so that we can plan ahead to make sure we have a expeditious process. Fair enough? Sounds good. Okay, so proposals themselves on page 2 of the RFP. Proposals themselves are due by 5 p.m. August 9th. What are we looking at from here? We're looking at what, 5, 6 weeks? So somewhere from today. Um, so what we expect from you is we expect one original signed packet and one electronic copy that's sent to our JJ_grants email address, JJ_grants at bscc.ca.gov. So make sure you get both of them in. They both need to be here by 5 p.m. on August 9th. So do not wait. Um, if you, yeah, we've had people drive them and drop them off on the very last minute of the very last day. It's just like, don't delay on this. When we hit the 5 o'clock cutoff, it's done. So please make sure you understand that August 9th by 5 p.m. All right. So on page 4 of the grant, it covers program purpose areas. So for your proposal, the areas you can choose for your proposal include aftercare and reentry, alternatives to detention and placement, community-based programs, diversion, mental health services, mentoring, counseling, and training programs. So within the RFP, there is a significant amount of information regarding these individual program purpose areas. I'm not going to get into them here. So the information begins actually on it does begin on page 4, where it discusses eligible activities. And then for each of those, it gets into detail of what those activities are. So what I want to make sure that, when it discusses objectives and goals, these aren't like, you're not bound to these objectives and goals. What this is federal definitions that provided to us. Here's what this means. If you tailor it to your program, if this just gives you an overview of here's what this means and here's what's expected within that particular program purpose area. So just want to make sure that you understand, don't cut, oh, if we're going to take these and put this in, tailor your program to what fits best with your community. Use the data in your area to drive what is going to be your intervention, to use the data in your area to drive, within your needs statements, to drive what it is that you're going to address within your community. This is intended to be something that is locally beneficial, where you have a local need, you have a local, you can present that need, and then from displaying what that need is, then you drive your proposal to discuss in the narrative of how we're going to address it, how what community support we're going to use to address it, et cetera. So this gives you an overview. You're not bound to these goals and objectives, is what I'm telling you. Just letting you know that these present what that means for you, so you can take it from there. Any questions on that? Any questions online from that portion? And then I also want to add too, you can actually choose more than one program purpose area. You can have multiple program purpose areas. You could have all the program purpose areas if it fits within what you're doing. So, so if you, as you move forward, take a look at those. Some of them fit hand in hand. Aftercare and reentry might also have some mental health services. So just know that as you move forward with this, on the very back of the in the proposal portion, there's a grant program work plan for every proposal, and it's for those of you that are here. It's the last 2 pages of the RFP. Not the blank back page, but the very last 2 pages gives you the program work plan. So you need to complete a work plan, a single sheet like this. You need to complete that work plan for each of the program purpose areas. So each individual one should have their own goals and objectives, but you can have more than one. It's more than likely that we would expect you would have more than one. So, but it's not mandatory. Not, it's just the way services go. It goes hand in hand. So, um, so no questions on that. We'll proceed. All right. So target population within the RFP, page 3, lists the target population. So this year is a little different. The last RFP that we had for Title II capped it at age 18, but after working with our federal counterparts, and a lot of discussion at the executive steering committee level, through multiple reasons, including brain science, our state's Division of Juvenile Justice, now being able to have youth up to age 25. There's a number of factors that we used, or that our executive steering committee used to determine that the target population for this Title II grant are juveniles that are under the age of 26. So you can provide services all the way up through 25. We found this important because, as you know, someone may have committed a crime and be on juvenile probation at 23, 24, 25. The courts, I think, even go up to 22 or 23. So there's folks that are still within the system that may need, say, aftercare, et cetera, that are over the age of 18. So it goes up to the age of 26. I think that is a good change in the state of California, and I'm glad the executive steering committee went that way. And so, any questions on the age target population? I'm looking at my IT staff over here. Okay, we're good. Okay, so non-governmental organization, we discussed that a little bit as far as an eligible entity. I want to get into this a little bit deeper. For a full list of requirements for an NGO, Appendix C of this RFP actually has a page that discusses the NGO criteria, but I'm going to hit a couple highlights here. So for an NGO, the things that are required: you must be a duly organized, in existence, and in good standing for at least 6 months. Um, you also must be registered with the California Secretary of State office, if applicable. Have a valid business license if required by the applicable local jurisdiction. Have any other licenses or certification necessary to provide the services that you're stating you'll provide, and then also have a physical address. So one thing I do want to point out on this per our chief counsel is that there are some criteria here where we do have um, we're looking at some small entities that we're going to make sure for our rural to ensure that we have a rural consideration that at least one individual location that's a small entity applicant that meets the minimum threshold of our grant scoring gets receives funding for this. So what I want to say is that you must have a physical address and a proposal for that location. You cannot say choose an outlying county that's considered rural based off of the definition of rural, have a PO box there and be providing services in, say, LA or San Francisco County. You must actually reside and provide services in the area where you are applying. So, want to make that clear. If you have a PO box, but your services are elsewhere and in a jurisdiction that's not considered small, you will be considered not ineligible. So for the small county portion. So um, RFP overview. So we discussed this a little bit. Project funding, 3 years. Again, oh, my date's wrong. It's going to be beginning December 1. 4 million maximum requests can be up to 350,000. Um, all eligible applicants compete in one category, except there are some conditions here. Um, again, I mentioned the small county in Appendix D, we actually have from the Department of Finance, there's a list of the thresholds on what's considered within the state of California by the Department of Finance as a small, medium, or large. So if you are a city that is a big city, but you're in what's considered a small county based off of population, you can compete in the small county. If you are a service provider that may be a large organization, but you're in a what's considered a by county size with the Department of Finance small, you can compete within that small category. So just want to make sure that's clear. The location where you provide services and the county that you reside in determines whether you're small. All other counties, there is no difference between large and small. Um, it's just we want to make sure that we fund that one rural exception. So there is a total scoring threshold of total points of 66.5% of all total points is the minimum. If a proposal scores below that, it will not make the threshold to move forward for funding consideration. Um, we talked about the small county, and then one other unique twist to this that was decided by our SACJAB in this is that at least one proposal from each of the program purpose areas will be funded. So we have 6 different program purpose areas. The intent is that at least one proposal from each will be funded. So just want to make sure that's understood as well. However, if we have a specific category that has nobody applying, or no one in that category meets the minimum threshold, then we will have it won't be funded. Um, you can't fund something that doesn't exist. So, all right, moving on. So project funding information, again, does not require a match. And then supplanting of funds is not allowed. And we have a section in here that discusses supplanting. Um, and that is, I guess I don't want to get too much into the definition of it other than if you have an existing program that's locally funded, you, we're not going to take federal funds to take and replace the funds and then you can use those funds for other things. Supplanting is not allowed. Um, we're expecting new programs within that. But take a look at the RFP. It has a definition. If you have any questions on specific on supplanting, send them to the email address, and I'll get our legal team, et cetera, to be able to provide a more specific answer. Okay, so on page 8 of the slide, we talk about pass-through. Again, as mentioned, government agencies must pass through a minimum of 70% of funds to direct service providers. This includes tribes as a government agency. However, if those direct services are met by the tribe and as stated within their proposal, they can be exempt from that pass-through portion. And then NGOs, as mentioned, are considered direct service providers. So on page 9, this particular RFP does require a local evaluation plan. And the local evaluation plan must identify goals and objectives and how effectiveness will be assessed. The local evaluation report at the end is really basically a detail of, was the project successful overall in meeting the goals. And as mentioned on the very back 2 pages of this is of the RFP is a work plan. That is the beginning stages of the development of your local evaluation plan. If you receive funding, there will be more information that will be provided, but there also is some questions within the RFP on how you will address developing that plan. So keep that in mind. Um, and then on page 18, so one of the things that we have in California is or within our tech job is, one of a large effort is racial and ethnic disparities within the juvenile justice system. And we have quite a bit of data that shows that it exists. And basically where you see the disparity is that within the system, there's a number of key points. Um, and again, I want to refer you to page 18 of the RFP for this one. I'm going to go to the next slide. So there are a number of key points within the juvenile justice system where we can compare race, um, where you have, youth population, that's fine, the overall youth population in the area by percentage. And then all of a sudden we move to the next level, which is juvenile arrests. So if you take, say, a white youth and compare it to any other race, Asian, Hispanic, Black, you can see at this level of arrest that the white youth receives, does not get arrested at that same point as often as the others. And then if you move to the court and the court has referrals for, say, or being referred to the court just from the arrest side and referred to the court, you'll also see a disparity. So the interesting thing through this process is that um, that we know by data that the disparity exists, but all it does is say that it exists. It doesn't say why. So um, what we're looking for, um, we have a RED or a subcommittee within our state advisory group that is actually looking at a deeper analysis of some of the county issues, et cetera, within the entirety of the system. What we're looking at for you in this process of developing your RFP is to consider that racial disparity and consider how in the program proposal that you develop, you will address that disparity or mitigate some issues. There are some counties and some past programs that have done a really good job of this and have found even within the programs and services that they're providing that they found some disparity on who was referred to their program, who received services, who didn't, et cetera. I'm going to leave this up to you. If you have questions, there is some information on here on that will link you over to our RED subcommittee website that provides a number of documents for more background on this. But understand this is a big part of the scoring on how you integrate, how you're going to address within your program to ensure that the disparity doesn't exist, or even possibly target a portion of that disparity that's going to be a part of your proposal that will be rated. So if you have any specific questions, my email address is actually in the RFP. You can email me directly. If you have overall general questions that I'm going to put up into the Q&A section. You also can email JJ_grants at bscc.ca.gov. That will actually go to me directly as well. So either way, I will do what I can to assist you and help you provide an answer. But as we get to the actual components that will be rated, you'll see how it's integrated once you read through it. We're not going to cover it today. I'm going to point to where it is, but you can read the questions. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to ask me. All right. So other components within the RFP, we have the grant agreement. There's a governing board and a tribal resolution. There's discussion on audit requirements. We will have a grantee orientation. We'll cover the date on that. It'll probably be in January sometime. Talk about funding disbursement. There's quarterly progress report information in here on what would be expected of you. I suggest you look through this to make sure that you understand what what it is you're applying to and what conditions will occur as far as audits and when funding's distributed and dispersed, particularly for NGOs. You want to know that there's actually a list with some calendar dates of expectations for invoices and then reimbursements. Know that so that you have a full understanding that I know particularly in the NGOs, some putting this is a reimbursable grant program, not by our design but by the federal government's design. So we don't receive all the funding. We have to actually apply to have the funds provided to us, and then we provide the funds back down to you. There's some mechanisms involved in that, where we're for this reimbursable process. Just so you know, it's a by reimbursable process, or they consider it an activity-based grant. You say, here's the activity we're going to perform. Here's how much it costs to do it. You then do that activity, and then you say, okay, here's the bill for it. Then you get paid back for it. So that's what it's meant by reimbursable. I hope that's a simple way to put it. So for your NGOs in particular, take a look, please, at the funding disbursement dates um, and timing of how we operate as a government entity, so that you're not surprised that you're not, if you submit an invoice, you're not going to get a check that day. There is some timing built in. There are some laws and restrictions on it. There is prompt payment policies, et cetera. Actually, prompt payment laws. So just know, so you can manage exactly what your proposal looks like. So. And then quarterly progress reports. This is a requirement by the federal government for a number of reports, for sequential reports that go to them, as well as we as BSCC will also have some information that we'll ask for you. These are standard reports. There's examples within the RFP. Um, and it's just series of questions, updates on data, et cetera. Um, so know those exist, please. Other requirements, there's discussion in here on travel, how travel works, travel policies. Our expectation is that you have a policy. If you don't, that you would then follow the state's policy. There's a discussion in the RFP regarding debarment, fraud, theft, and embezzlement and what that means. Please read through that. So again, you know what you're agreeing to. We do actually complete comprehensive monitoring visits where we actually come to your site. And take a look at how things are going, provide technical assistance as needed, ensure that there's supporting documentation for expenses that have incurred, ensure that you're actually following and moving down the path that you developed to complete your program. There is an actual link in here to our BSCC website that will, for our comprehensive monitoring visits, that will show you the latest and greatest. We have made it a link instead of an actual document this time because we do make updates periodically. So if you want to take a look at that and see what we're going to be checking when we come visit. And then we also have some information in the RFP regarding effective programs and data-driven approaches. I would suggest also that you would take a look at that. There's some good information there. If you have any questions on that, please let me know. We take a unique approach in that I mentioned data-driven approaches, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be evidence-based. It also can be evidence-supported. It can be data supported for your program itself. Particularly, you may have I'll give you an example. You may have a curriculum that may be evidence-based, but the application of the curriculum is different than how they originally evaluated the curriculum to determine it to be evidence-based. So those of you who are involved in fidelity know that to be utilized in an evidence-based manner, you would need to present the curriculum in the exact same form as the way it was evaluated, potentially even the exact same population, et cetera. So we understand that there are some unique twists that you're going to have in your program. So we support data supported as well. So if there isn't an evidence-based evaluation on your specific approach, if the data supports your approach, we're supportive of that. So. And then again, also, I mentioned the information on reducing the racial and ethnic disparities within the juvenile justice system. Up forward a little bit. So on page 11, we'll walk through this a little bit on the rating process. But let me stop real quick. Any questions of the audience at this point? Provided you a ton of information. How about online? Are we doing good? No questions? Pause and wait. Hold on one second. We're taking a look at the online system. Okay, so let's take the questions. If we have nothing from the audience, we'll go through with the live stream questions first, and I'll see what I can answer. And again, if I can't answer them, we will take them back and I will address them in a Q&A, which we'll put out as quickly as possible.
Do we need to submit a separate application for each of the program purpose area? Or can one application propose to focus on all 6 program purpose areas?
One application can focus on all 6 program purpose areas. The expectation would be on the end of the RFP where it has the work plan for your program work plan, that you individually address the program purpose areas with a sheet for each. And you have specific goals for those program purpose areas. But your overall program and proposal absolutely can address all. It can address 1, it can address 2, it can address 3, it can address all of them, however you design your program. Absolutely.
Will you be posting the list of entities that submit letters of intent to apply, or at least the total number of letters received on the frequently asked questions page?
I don't think we've ever done that before. If it's something that's possible, I have no comment. I'll get back to you on that.
Will an organization need to submit a separate application for each program area?
Yeah, and I just addressed that one. The answer is
Same
no.
one, sorry.
One
Um,
application can cover all the program purpose areas,
Okay.
or as many as you choose.
If you cover more than one purpose area, how do you select 2 from each proposed area? Purpose area, said the same.
So within the rating process, what they will do is make sure that there is that all of the program purpose areas are covered. So if your application covers them all, they're when they go through the rating process, they're just going to evaluate to make sure that they have each of them covered. So if one proposal covers all 6, we do know that one of each of them are covered. That's how they will handle that at the evaluation process. So not really sure how else to answer that other than as long as all of the program purpose areas are addressed. If one proposal is chosen that meets all of those, then they check that box, and then we just go on funding down the um, um, down the list.
The RFP indicates that if electronic version is received on time, an identical hard copy arrives in a reasonable time thereafter, it will not be it will not be disqualified.
Oh,
Is that the case?
if it states that, then follow that. Um, I will get back on the Q&A on that one then. That I want to make sure on that one because we've had multiple RFPs. I want to make sure that states the correct way. So if it states within the RFP that you can get us the electronic copy by 5 and then follow it up with the mailed copy, the hard copy, then follow that. I will address that in the Q&A and make sure that's put out there. If I misspoke on that, I apologize, and we'll get that corrected in the Q&A.
Do you have an idea about typical RED training participation venues, days of training in a year?
For the state of California, at this point, no. I don't know of any training venues at this point. I do know that as we move down our process, we will at times be probably within at least one time within this process be presenting a training that we will mandate attendance. It may be live stream, it may be in person. We'll see. But at this point, I have no specifics on who would provide that training. I do know there's quite a bit of information through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. You could check out their website. There's also information, Burns Institute, Annie Casey Foundation. There's a number of consultant entities that have done quite a bit of work, something that you could definitely Google and find out. But we're not at this point mandating that you have had any training on this. We're trying to direct you towards resources for understanding, so that you can integrate it into your RFP.
Doesn't the Title II grant RFP state that the applicant can send the electronic grant on August 9 and mail the hard copy thereafter?
We discussed that. I'll address that in the Q&A.
Just to be clear, can a nonprofit apply for the grant without going through the government entity as pass-through, meaning a nonprofit can apply directly without a government entity?
That is correct. A nonprofit can provide or present an application, a proposal without going through a government entity. They can directly apply. And a NGO, nonprofit, non-government organization is not subject, since they're considered direct service providers, is not subject to the 70% pass-through requirement. Good?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, we'll continue on. Catch my breath here. Talking straight. All right. So, page 11 of the RFP, discussing the rating process. Um, okay, so within the rating process for the disqualification portion, um, just take a look at the bullet point on page 11 and then the bullet point on page 12. So really the two criteria are you didn't get your application in on time, and it looks like it can be either or, the electronic or hard copy on time, so you are correct on that. Good catch. Thank you for pointing that out, and I will address that in the in the frequently asked questions as well. And also that you're not an eligible entity. Those are the only two criteria at this point that would lead to a complete disqualification. What we do when we receive the proposals is we then go through a technical review process where we take a look to make sure dollars match up and you're within the page limits of that are provided. You have all the information that's needed. When we do this technical review, um, once we've completed the review, if there are components that are missed or inconsistencies in the budget, et cetera, we will actually reach out to you directly and give you a chance to fix things that can be fixed that are non-substantive. So for instance, um, if say the page limit is 15 and you present 20 pages, we will give it back to you. You cannot rewrite it, but you can take the last 5 pages out. You stick within the limits of this. There's more to it than that, that we find within this technical review process, but it's really an opportunity for things that may be missed or inconsistencies um, that are non-substantive, that are non-rated. At that point in time, you're not able to rewrite your proposal. I want to make that clear. If you've gone way over the pages, you're not going to be able to rewrite it to condense it down. It's very specific on this. It's not your chance to submit something and then okay, we'll fix it in a technical review. That portion is non-substantive to make sure that we have everything in line to be able to match up. If certain portions of math are inconsistent or missing a signature in a place, but you have it in another, we'll say, hey, can you get that part signed too? Just technical that on that aspect would be that review. And then, like I said, we'll contact you directly, get it prepared, get it ready, get everything completely checked off, and then it'll move forward then into the rating process. So we mentioned on the PowerPoint slides here notification. So the notification will be us to you, letting you know that, hey, we have a couple technical changes that need to be addressed. So moving on. So rating of these proposals, we have a minimum threshold of scoring, which is 66% of all the points available. And we'll discuss points here in a second on the RFP. And this is page 13 of the RFP, by the way. So we have project need and the ESC, Executive Steering Committee, through our SACJAB and then to our BSCC, our board, through their approval process has determined the percentage value for your description of the need is 25%. The point range would be 1 to 5. We'll get into that a little bit more. And then project description, 30%. Program goals and objectives, 30%. Your data collection and evaluation would be 5% of your total points available, and your program budget will be 10% of points available. There are no preference points, but I did mention there are, um, there will be one small entity where those that one organization of whichever type that presents a proposal that falls within a small jurisdiction will be funded, and then we will, if we have all of the program purpose areas addressed, in one shape or form, we will have at least funded every one of the program purpose areas in this process. So um, I don't want to confuse that too much, so we'll continue on. Okay, so the 5-point rating scale looks like this, real quick. So a poor rating in a number one would be a response that addresses a criteria in a very inadequate way. Fair would be the response addresses the criteria in a non-specific or unsatisfactory way. Um, the satisfactory would be the response addresses the criteria in an adequate way. Good. Number four being the response addresses the criteria in a substantial way. And excellent, five, the response addresses the criteria in an outstanding way. There's more to that than that. If you our rating process are public meetings, not when they take them home, but the training they receive, as well as I think, well, I'm not sure the training, but the final meeting where they do the consensus meeting would be a public meeting. Um, you can actually view and or be in the audience during that discussion portion. Um, so I do want to now, let's see what we got next. Actually, before we move to the next slide, turn to page 21 the um, of the proposal. Actually, it starts on 20 and then works through 21. This is quite possibly the most important part of this RFP for you, if you take a look. So um, we talk about this 1 to 5 scale. Well, here are the categories, and in this section here, you have program need, and it lists what the needs are: 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Works its way through 1.6. These are the questions that you need to answer. It's how you answer these specific questions is how you will be rated. I can't say that any more simple. How you address what's listed here is how you will be rated on this scale. So I'm not going to tell you how to write your proposal. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Just I'm letting you know that they're going to look at each individual question 1.1 and say, how did they answer that question? 1 to 5. And then they'll go to the next one, 1 to 5. And they'll keep going down the list to discuss how you address that. So good information in here in itself, but also the questions will tell you what they're looking for in as far as the proposals to be provided. I do want to point out one thing. If you look at number 5 in the section under the program budget, so you have two parts that are being rated here. There's a link underneath the rating criteria, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, that has a budget attachment within the RFP. That's also later in the document as well. So the budget attachment is a defined document. There is, for those of you who are here in the audience, there are some copies on the table. For those of you who are viewing online, you can actually click the RFP and it will take you there now. That is the budget build itself. You got two parts to that. The document that is the hyperlink document on the RFP. One part is the budget itself on how how the budget ties into your program. And so I mentioned it's an activity-based program. We are going to do this, and it takes this to actually make that happen. And here's the costs of that. So your budget ties into your proposal. What you're going to do costs dollars. You're describing how those dollars are going to, or what are the dollars are that in your budget. What does it take to make this happen? And then there's a narrative portion where you describe what it takes to make it happen as far as detail on what the dollars and budget means. So you got two parts to it. within the attachment. There's also a third part that I really want to make sure you understand and address in your narrative. So 5.1 and 5.2 within this RFP are within the link. Those two portions of your rating will be addressed within the link. It's actually the budget itself and the narrative over the 3-year budget. The 5.3 you would address in a narrative. 5.3 states describe how the resources are being applied to the benefit of young people. Simple question. Address that in the narrative, please, not within the budget attachment. Okay? Or within your proposal, not within the budget attachment. So I hope that makes sense. Any questions on that? Any questions so far? Okay, so as with this is scored, like I mentioned, 1 through 5, 1 through 5, 1 through 5 for each of the questions. Then the total score for the area for that section is then weighted to the other scores, which then the minimum scoring threshold is 66% of all total points. Once you meet that or exceed that threshold, then you're eligible then to be funded, and then it'll be um, based off of the highest scoring on down, apart from the exception for the small entity or the small locality and the ensuring along the way that all the program purpose areas, if possible, are funded. Okay, so we're good so far? Any more questions on that section? Okay. So I'm going to flip around a bit. I'm going to take you to the back section of the document here, of the RFPs. For those of you who are here, it'll be the last 6 pages. It starts off with um, program proposal cover sheet. Okay. I'll give a second here. It's not a numbered page, so I'm not able to give you the number for those out there live streaming, but it's the very end of the RFP. Starts at about 7 pages in from the back. Are we good in the audience here? You have that page? Okay. So the very beginning portion of this, there's a document called the Program Proposal Checklist. So this program proposal checklist is your guidebook or your guiding page on what you need to include within your application. Okay. This describes it all. It tells you the font that's expected. It tells you the spacing. It tells you the number of pages per section. It tells you the attached documents that need to be provided if applicable. This page is the outline of your proposal. Cover sheet, proposal checklist needs to be assigned. The checklist needs to be signed. There's also if you look through here, it talks about, or there's a section here on applicant information. So within this, read through this, the applicant information also has a authorized signature that certifies eligibility, et cetera. So this is where you build your proposal. Now, we presented this online in Word document. So your proposal the proposal abstract page, that's about the 4th page in on this section, you can actually fill it in right on this document. Under program need, you can actually begin writing within that section of this document. So this, don't alter these sheets, just follow them and build your proposal using this information or using this template, I guess would be the way to put it. So when you get to the budget section, there is a section for narrative and also, as I mentioned, that narrative portion, the answer 5.3, but there is also the attachment that you will then provide, which is that budget attachment on the budget that you're building. That is on the expenses to fund your project. And then the next couple pages beyond that are the grant program work plan, as mentioned. For each of the program purpose areas, you choose, fill out one of these sheets. There's, I believe, 2 copies. You can make multiple copies of these, but make sure you fill out one of these sheets. Any questions on that? If you want to know if you're missing something, take a look at that program checklist. That will delineate it all out for you. It should lay it out. If you got any questions along the way, please ask the Q&A. Please email Like I said, I get those emails directly. Please send us your questions and we'll answer along the way. But this will tell you how to write it as far as what needs to be included. Okay. So with this, I'd say probably your two most important pages are this page, or your sections are this section, because this is your templates, and then also the rating criteria, the specific questions that you're going to ask, because that's what you're rated on. Okay. All right. And again, also the budget. Do not alter the budget page either. Stick with the template. Just follow the template. It covers all 3 years. It has explanation pages. There's quite a bit of information in there. So we'll talk about the budget table right now. So linked within the RFP. So I don't need to cover that anymore. So a couple nuts and bolts that our finance folks asked me to make sure that I relay back to you. Funds must be requested in whole dollars only. I'm not sure if the template will allow you to do any different unless you alter it, but um, to the zero, do your rounding, whatever it takes. We can only be in whole dollars. Pennies do not work. We're not also, that's the same for us. This is federal policy. When we present our budgets to the federal government, um, we aren't able to go to the penny either. So whole dollars only. Budget line items are limited to those contained in the budget attachment. So do not alter the document to create additional line items. Those line items match up with the line items that the federal government gives us. So um, don't include, oh, we have XYZ. Make a new line item. Don't create additional categories. Not allowed. Stick with the template, please. That's the best advice I can give you. Stick with the template. And then if no money is requested for a particular line item, just please enter zero. Don't leave it blank, just enter zero. Um, don't and NA in the narrative. So if you have a section like say consulting contracts and you're not hiring a consultant, put zero in the dollar and then in the narrative portion put NA. It's not applicable. So I hope that makes sense on that portion. So indirect costs on the budget table, it has a good explanation of indirect costs. If your organization, and some of yours do, have a federally approved from your cognizant agency with the federal government, a negotiated and approved indirect cost rate, you can use that cost rate. So there's a way to choose A or B. The second portion is the federal de minimis of 10% of total direct costs. Um, the calculations are within the budget document. Again, please don't alter it. Um, and for those that are here taking pictures of these screens, it's actually, if you have the budget attachment, it actually explains it in far more detail than what I'm presenting here. So for those of you at home or in your office live streaming, if you click on that budget narrative, you will see there is a section in there that has quite a bit of detail on the indirect cost rate portion. Any questions on that?
One question. On the budget, you have an example, but is tied to 3 years. Is the BSCC asking to multiply 3 years on staff salary on each budget, or just add salaries for 1 year for each of the three budgets?
I will answer that in that it really depends on your project. If your project has some significant expenses on the front end that don't carry over into following years, you would do each year specific to what your program design requires. If you're going to have, say, one staff member be oversight or be the administrator, or I'm going to throw something out there, maybe if you choose mental health and you have a mental health professional that's going to be through the duration of the project for the same amount of hours every year, however it be, then that would cross over 3 years. But it really depends on how your proposal's written. They could cross 3 years. It could cross 1 year. It could be at the tail end. It's really up to you on the design of your program. So basically what you're looking at is we're presenting a program proposal. The proposal is going to take 3 years to complete. The hope is that you expect that the program would continue and there is some sustainability beyond. But you're going to take a look at, here's our proposal, here's our design, here's what we expect to accomplish through this program, and here's the cost along the way. It may be different by year, it may be the same across all years.
Is the work plan counted against the 15-page narrative limit? It is a separate item on the checklist, but the narrative infers it is included in the counted pages. Can you clarify? Thank you.
The work plan does not count against the 15-page narrative limit. That is a separate attachment. And I'll address that in the Q&A as well. Any other questions? Okay. So moving on. You guys are a very friendly audience to me today. Okay, so appendices. So I'll go through what's in here within the appendix, just so that you know what to look for, where to look for it. I'm not going to thumb through each of the individual ones. I'm just going to get to the start of it. So Appendix A is the JJDPA excerpt, which includes the applicable state plan components. I suggest you just um, breeze through that. There's a couple areas, particularly in eligibility, that refer to this section. So just make sure that if you have any questions, you can refer to that. If you have any other specific questions, feel free to email them. Appendix B is a list of the federally recognized California tribes. And again, there is also a requirement within the JJDPA of law enforcement functions. But like I said, contract law enforcement functions are also acceptable. Appendix C is the criteria for NGOs. It's a little bit more detailed than what I provided in the slide presentation. Make sure that you know that's there. If you're an NGO applying, you'll want to make sure that you meet those criteria, the criteria as defined. Appendix D is the county population index. So if you're thinking that you meet the criteria to apply into that and be considered within that small applicant pool, take a look at what if your entity resides and will be providing services in one of those listed by the Department of Finance as being within a small county, then you will know. E would be a glossary of terms. That's important as well. If you have any terms on or any questions on some specific terminology along the way, there are some references within the RFP to this page as well. Appendix F is a sample local evaluation plan. So take a look at that as well. The local evaluation plan will be required within this process for those that are funded. So take a look at what that looks like. There are some questions on how you will develop it, et cetera, within the RFP. So just make sure you know what exactly the plan itself would look like. And then, as mentioned earlier, we have the SACJAB, or our State Advisory Group roster, and also the Executive Steering Committee roster. For those of you that may be concerned, I suggest you take a look to make sure who's on that, if they are part of your organization or affiliated with your organization. Check with us and or them, and let's make sure that they recuse themselves appropriately along the way to ensure you're eligible without any issue with conflict of interest. Appendix I. This is a sample grant agreement. This is something you'll want to take a look at along the path as well, because of the fact that we've included the applicable federal conditions as well within the sample grant agreement. This may be the final grant agreement with some tweaks, but I do know the actual conditions that exist within there are things that you will be expected to ensure that you have in place within your organization. I mean, this discusses EEO policy, ADA access, limited English proficiency. There's a number of components within that. You want to just make sure. I really want to make sure that we as BSCC want to make sure you know what you're signing up for. So we include a copy of what that agreement will look like and what the conditions are that the federal government provides to us that would then pass down to you as well. So, please take a look at that. Appendix J would be a sample of the governing board or tribal council resolution. So if you can take a look at that. Appendix K is a sample Title II grant program progress report, informational. Appendix L is something that you would have to sign, which is a certification of compliance with BSCC policies regarding debarment, fraud, theft, and embezzlement. That section's self-explanatory. Won't get into it. And again, mentioned we do comprehensive monitoring visits There is a link to the tool that we use, so you can take a look at that. And basically what it is the things that are pass-through conditions, use of funds, et cetera, that are required of both the state and the federal government. We just ensure that you're following them. And then Appendix N is some resources for evidence-based practices that may help you as you develop your proposal. And then as we just went through the proposal package itself, the checklist, the applicant information, the proposal narrative, and then the budget table and narrative that are the links. And then we also then have the work plan. So any questions on that so far before I discuss some of the key dates again? We're good? You guys good? Okay. Key dates. As mentioned, letter of intent, if you wouldn't mind, please. Oh, I do have a wrong date. I'm going to step off the slide here real quick. Yeah, let's go into the RFP itself on this for key dates. It would be on page. I have an error in the slide, so I'm not going to give it to you through the slide here. So just give me 1 second. Okay. So it should be just before the appendices on the RFP. Okay, so it'll be page 19 of the document in front of you. Okay, so let's follow down this path. So those of you who are with us, if you take a look at the RFP copy, it's on page 19. For those of you who are here, again, page 19 of the documents that were on the table for you to look at. So we did release the proposal, or the solicitation. We released them on June 14th. Today, June 27th is the bidders conference. Then we have letters of intent. If you plan to apply, please, we ask you, it's non-binding. If you send one in and you decide not to apply, or if you don't send one in and then decide to apply, it's okay. Just make sure that if you do know you're going to apply, please let us know so that we can plan. So those would be due July 12th. And then grant proposals are due back to the Board of State and Community Corrections on August 9th. And then the technical compliance review will begin right after that. That process should take a couple weeks to do for those of you then who have submitted a proposal. And we find some technical aspects that can be addressed that don't affect the rating criteria. We will be in contact directly with you at that point in time. So non-substantive changes is what it states. So we'll go through that process. Early September, we're going to begin the proposal rating process. It'll begin with our executive steering committee coming in and receiving some rater training by our research staff on the specifics of the scoring and how it relates to this particular specific grant. At that point in time, then each of them will be given a number of applications to review. Or well, actually, I believe they'll be given they may be in teams. It depends on how many we get. Will depend on how we allocate the resources. It may be a smaller group of 4 to 5. It may be if we have just a few, maybe they'll rate them all. So we'll see once we know how many applications we get, how we'll determine the allocation of scoring. But then they'll do their scoring portion. They'll come back to us. At that point, our research department will then go through the process of evaluating the scores and taking a look at outliers. And then we'll have a consensus meeting where the group will come back and we'll take a look and see where some of the inconsistencies may have lied within the scoring, and they'll have a chance to discuss it. They'll have a chance to change their score at that point in time. And then the final list of who is going to be recommended for funding will be put together at that point. It may not be done at that meeting proper. There may be some things that need to be scored and consolidated by our research department, but within a few days we should know. And then at that point in time, we do have an October 23rd meeting of our State Advisory Committee, or our SAG, our SACJAB. That one will be meeting in Southern California. That meeting will be in Southern California at Loyola Law School. If somebody is interested in attending, they can continue to monitor our website for meetings and specific addresses. But at that meeting, the recommendations for funding will be presented to them. And then, should they approve, it will then go to the board itself on November 14th. And then once they approve, then notice will go out and we'll begin moving into the contract phase. Contracts will officially begin December 1, but we do realize there are some entities that may need to give board approval, county board of supervisor approval. If an NGO, maybe there's a governing board there that would need to approve them to enter into contract. However that works within your agency, we would work with you to then get you under contract and get moving. However, work will begin, or should, the effective date of the beginning of the program is December 1. And then, as mentioned earlier, in January, we'll do a mandatory orientation training. To go into that a little further, then what I will do is I will actually be visiting each of the sites of the grantees after the orientation training to answer and provide technical assistance as needed for your specific program. And then as you begin work, I will then more than likely be having group conference calls monthly or whatever we're going to maintain contact. We'll discuss, make sure our invoices are completed properly. We'll all work together to make sure that you're successful. After things are rolling and moving well, we'll then start looking at coming out and doing some of the comprehensive monitoring visits for you, which will be a little bit more detailed look at your program, making sure that everything's in order, and additional technical assistance as needed as well. And then monitoring visits as needed beyond that. Whatever you would need from me and whatever you need from BSCC, we'll make sure that we can provide as much assistance and resources as possible. Our goal is to provide you enough information and be as much of an assistance as we possibly can for you to be as successful as you can in meeting your program goals. Okay. Any questions? That is the completion of the Title II portion of this. Any questions of the audience? My day's going great, by the way. If you're no questions like that, how are we doing online? Nothing. Okay. And again, this isn't the end of your opportunity to ask questions. If you have them along the way, we are here for you to assist you in whatever way we can, whatever way we can with anything that that we can without. We can't help you write your proposal. You obviously know that, but we can answer questions you may have along the way. Again, you can send it to jj_grants.ca or .bscc.ca.gov. You can reach out. Please do. RED questions. There's some information, and including my email address if you need to have questions on that. I'm the RED coordinator for the Title II program. So I may be able to lead you in the right direction. If you have questions on that portion, you can email me directly. Whatever I can do to help you. I want you guys to put together a successful proposal. I want to see your programs do great work in the communities. I want to see youth be served, and let's get them on the right path. So without any other questions, we'll go and talk about the differences of the tribal. Nothing? Okay. All right. So on the tribal, okay, we do have some audience leaving here. They're waving at me, so I'm waving back. We'll see you soon. All right. So for the tribal youth program, I'm going to just cover some of the significant differences. You guys have seen some of the major components. The calendar itself is exactly the same. We're going to mirror these along the same path. They will be rated during the same timing, et cetera. So key differences within the tribal youth program is that the total amount of funding is $100,000 annually. Significantly different than the tribal or the Title II program. But I do also want to make sure, tribes, you do know that you can apply to both. You're not limited to one or the other. You can apply to the tribal youth program here, and you also can apply to the Title II program. You're eligible for both. So, so on this particular program, 100,000, is allocated. It's 100,000 annually. Awards are it's a 3-year cycle, 3-year grants, so it's 100,000 each year for 3 years. The maximum award amount is up to 100,000. If you want or need less, that's fine, but you can apply all the way up to $100,000. Again, the anticipated program period is December 1, 2019 through November 30th, 2022. There is no pass-through for this program, and there is no match requirement either. So eligible applicants, federally recognized tribes with law enforcement functions. And again, I want to caveat, if you contract for those law enforcement functions, that is acceptable. Target population would be Native American youth. And again, all the way up to the age of 26. So 25 and under are eligible to receive services. Eligibility criteria or applicant criteria, we discussed this. You can apply as a single tribe, or you can have a number of tribes that will want to apply together on this as well. Either way is acceptable. There's in a regional application, just make sure you identify one lead agency or one lead tribe within your application. Again, the executive steering committee is the exact same. So if you have, you want to take a look at the executive steering committee list and the SACJAB list to make sure you don't have any relationships that could potentially be a conflict of interest. And if you think there may be, let us know. We can work with you to research it and make sure that they properly recuse themselves to, which would allow you to be, again, eligible. So tribal youth RFP overview, again, same process. We have a grant agreement, the board resolution or tribal council resolution. There's audit requirements. There's a grantee orientation as well. Take a look at the funding disbursements on how the funding disbursements work, quarterly progress reports, et cetera. Take a look at the travel policy within the document, debarment, fraud, theft, embezzlement. Take a look at those requirements. Same wording says the Title II RFP. And again, I also want to mention, of the 6 identified within the Title II RFP, you can choose any of those 6. The primary focus is diversion, but you can choose any of the 6 program purpose areas for this RFP as well. Just again, to make sure that in your work plan, you provide a work plan for each of the individual program purpose areas that you would choose. So effective programs, again, data-driven, we discussed that already. Racial and ethnic disparities, as particularly how they would affect tribal youth. Disqualification process is the same. You're disqualified if you're not eligible, and if you don't provide your application on time. The technical review process is identical. We're going to actually review the tribal youth grant applications at the exact same time with the exact same panel. Notification will be done the exact same way. The rating process and scoring will be exactly the same as the Title II program that we just discussed. So this one is a little unique in that the tribal youth proposal has only 4 criteria. My slide is wrong here. Missed the 5 is supposed to be a 4, but it has a need, a description, program objective, and a budget are going to be scored in this section versus the 5 sections for the Title II program. So pay attention to that. Take a look at the percent value for each. The scoring itself will be the same, 1 through 5. And again, I also want to refer to within the tribal, I'm going to look at the page number real quick here. As you develop your RFP, starting on page 14 through page 18, each of those sections, as you develop your proposal, each of those sections have rating criteria. So like if you look at page 15 under need, it has 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and each of those have a list of things that you're expected to answer within your proposal. So within your proposal, address those questions specific because it's how you answer that question will determine your 1 through 5 score on that section, and then it'll be rolled up to an overall rating score, which will be then weighted against the other sections. So this whole section is how drives you forward on how you're going to write your proposal. So make sure you follow that. And then at the very end again, we have the same as Title II, where we have the program checklist. We have, again, included in that package for proposal package, we have the applicant information. We have which has all of the sections here for proposal narrative, the budget section. And again, the budget section itself has a hyperlink that will take you to the Excel sections. There's also then at the very end, there's the work plan document. Please complete this for each of the program purpose areas you would choose. Any questions on the tribal? Not very many significant differences other than the dollars are different and the actual target population is Native American youth. Any questions? Okay, so on that grant as well, we will have a separate Q&A within our on our web link where the RFPs are located. So make sure you look if there's questions that are answered that cross over between the two RFPs. I will make sure it's posted on both sections. But for the most part, we will have two separate specific question and answer portions that will be posted. So again, for tribal, if you have any questions, you can email the same location, jj_grants@bscc.ca.gov. It's also in the RFP, it links, etc. And then again, there's a couple areas like RED, me being the RED coordinator. If you want to ask specific questions on that, you can email me directly. So last chance, I will answer any questions for Title II and tribal youth RFPs that are left over. Do we have anything from our live stream crowd? Okay. Well, thank you all for participating, and I really wish you the best on developing your proposals. Any assistance that we can provide, please let us know. Thank you.